let's dive into the wide receiver position for fantasy football and talk about our initial rankings. Again, very subject to change, just our first rough draft, but you can let us know in the comments what you would change, how you have higher, who you have lower, things like that. But you know, it is June, and so a lot of this is going to change. Make sure you drop a like, and please subscribe. If you play fantasy football, those two things are free, easy, and they help us build this channel. But let's talk about the wide receiver position here. This is the position everybody tends to gravitate towards these days. Well, let's talk about the S tier here. 3 guys in the S tier, and you knew who they were. There's Jamar Chase, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Justin Jefferson. I think everybody, for the most part, has the same exact S tier. Jamar Chase coming off one of the best fantasy football seasons of all time. Period. He was. CeeDee Lamb, 2 seasons removed from one of the best fantasy football seasons of all time. Period. And Justin Jefferson, one of the best wide receivers of all time. Period.
Wide receiver 2 last year, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, with Sam Darnold throwing the ball. And a lot of people are like, well, actually, Sam Darnold's good. Like, no, I think actually...
You will never, ever get JJ at a discount ever again.
No, you won't. It was awesome last year when you did.
It was so nice.
It was so awesome to get JJ at a discount and then have your best friend trade him to you for pennies on the dollar. I just love it when that happens.
I knew it was
All
coming.
3 of these guys are elite. Draft them and build your fantasy teams around them.
A tier. Pretty much the same conversation with maybe a couple of questions for each of them. Malik Neighbors, he literally had 170 plus targets last year. 170. Let me say that one more time. 170 targets.
How many targets?
As a rookie last season. Wide receiver 6. And he missed 2 games. 2 games. He missed 2 games and had 170 targets. This dude could have legit broken the 200 target threshold if he had played those 2 extra games in the middle of the season. That's how ridiculous this guy was. Jackson Dart, Russell Wilson, I don't care. Malik Neighbors is going to be amazing this year, barring injury. He does have to stay healthy. He got a little bit banged up last season. Puka Nacua, literally the same issue. Puka Nacua missed a good chunk of the season last year, actually at the very beginning of the year. Got banged up in training camp. It was kind of went on the down low, and then he actually re-aggravated it in the first week of the season, and then I lost my mind and did some very irrational things in the Flock League because of it. I was down in the dumps. I was down bad. Puka for a couple of weeks there, down really, really bad. Puka Nacua is amazing, and when he came back on the field, he was elite. Top 5, not even a question. He just has to stay healthy. Same conversation. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the ultimate slot wide receiver in the NFL. I think the Ben Johnson situation is a little bit overplayed in terms of how it's going to impact guys like Amon-Ra producing in that offense. If you're going to worry about the production upside of some other guys in that offense, worry about the 3rd, 4th, and 5th options. Worry about Montgomery. Worry about Laporta. Worry about J-Mo and how that's going to look with all those 3 guys. Amon-Ra and Gibbs are going to be just fine. They are the go-to options in that offense, regardless of who's calling plays and regardless of how elite that play caller really is going to be. We'll miss Ben Johnson. We're not going to miss ARSB's production this year.
All right, next tier here. Guess what? Drake London was a wide receiver 1 last year. Guess what he's going to be this year? A wide receiver 1. That's not going to change. When you're looking at the splits with Michael Penix on the field, I mean, London actually had some of his best weeks of the season. In the last 3 weeks, I think Penix came on in week 16. So 16, 17, 18. 10 points, 17 points, and then 40 points. 8 targets, 13 targets, and 18 targets. He had 2 touchdowns in his last game, but, I mean, clearly, when you're looking at his splits here, and over 3 games, he's averaging, 13 targets a game? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And so I don't expect anything to change from Drake London's standpoint this year. I expect Michael Penix supporting him, and I honestly don't think anybody should think that's a hot take. Brian Thomas Jr., a lot of people, including Nathan, asked me before this. Nathan's like, okay, you aren't worried about Travis Hunter? Not necessarily, and here's why. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, will benefit from somebody who is running those, It just honestly, it depends on how they use Travis Hunter is my answer. It really does, because if they use Travis Hunter as an X outside on the boundary, that's a lot of what Brian Thomas was doing. And so from an alignment standpoint, you kind of wonder, and right now, the word out of the Jags camp, at least, is that Hunter's playing mostly wide receiver. But BTJ was amazing last year. He was 3rd in the league in receiving yards as a rookie. He was 4th in YAC, which means, by the way, high YAC totals typically mean that your production is sustainable. 6th in unrealized air yards. 8th in yards per out run. So he was one of the most efficient wide receivers in the league. I don't really care who you bring in. When you have a rookie season like this, I have absolutely zero reason not to draft you as early as he's going to be going this year. I have no reservations. I'm full send on BTJ. Go ahead.
Quick question, devil's advocate with BTJ.
Okay.
Are you worried about target volume volatility on a weekly basis?
But I think that's the type of player he is, and so I'm not worried about that. But you have to acknowledge.
I just think Evans Godwin. That's just what I think.
Yeah, but Evans is still somebody. Evans in his prime was somebody you would have taken right here.
Yes.
So that's my. I'm not.
I don't necessarily.
I'm acknowledging.
With you.
I'm acknowledging
I'm
that that's going to happen. I'm not worried about it because I already know it's going.
I'm trying to anticipate people's questions, and I think that's probably the main question you're going to have to have with BTJ.
Again, I will. Maybe not. I am full send on somebody who looks like that, who played like that, who had those stats in his rookie season. I'm not gonna. I'm gonna keep it simple.
His target volume was elite, all double digits consistently in the last third of the season last year as well.
Nico Collins playing hopefully all season this year. Played in 12 games last year, but he still had 1,000 yards in 12 games, 7 receiving touchdowns. He was 8th in fantasy points per game. It's about where we have him right now, is the wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8 range.
If he could stay healthy, he'd be an A tier.
And honestly, you know, from an opportunity standpoint, his target share was 25th in the league, which is not bad, considering that he was playing with Tank Dell last year. For most of the season, Tank Dell was healthy, right? He was playing with Stephon Diggs for at least the first couple weeks of the season. His efficiency metrics are also insane. 3rd in yards per out run. He averaged 2.9 yards per out run. That's insanely efficient. 9th in yards per target, which you kind of saw in how he was utilized, right? Not a ton of unrealized air yards. He really does make the most of every single one of his routes, because he's not really running that many routes, right? He's 70th in routes run last year in the league total. And in terms of, again, on a game-by-game basis, relative, the target rate is 9th in the league, but the targets themselves, 36th in the league. So, it's about eight targets per game. I think Nico's going to have a top 12 wide receiver season if he stays healthy, and I think that's where we have to draft him, right? And then A.J. Brown, kind of the same thing with A.J. Brown here, but, I think we have more questions about A.J. Brown than some people have in the community. Just given the fact that, on a points per game standpoint last year, his points per game has steadily declined from 2022. 17.6, 17, and then 16.7. He's down, a full point a couple, year over year. He's gone from being about the wide receiver 8 on average to last year being the wide receiver 12, and he got significantly less targets last year on a per game basis than he did before. Last year, 7.5 targets per game, right? Okay, and that's the 39th in the league. Before that, 9.3 targets per game in 2023. Even in 2022, 9.3, 8.6 in 2022. And so last season was, his lowest target amount per game in a very long time. Might have been the lowest of his career. Now, he's still 2nd in target share, but we know why that is. He can still dominate all the targets in his offense and not get that many targets because Saquon and Hurts had 1 million touchdowns last year. There's a reason Hurts had 1 million touchdowns and Saquon was, the running back 2 in fantasy football. And so, with Brown, the one thing you have to also keep in mind is we're talking about efficiency. Let's just stay on the trend. Yards per out run, 3.16. Even though the targets went down, he is so freaking efficient, it's not even funny. You make an argument he's the most efficient wide receiver in the league. And because he's, the however $1 million man on a Super Bowl winning team, one of the most efficient wide receivers in the league. I think that's a good enough reason, again, to take him 1st and 2nd round of your fantasy football drafts.
C tier gets a little fun here. We got JSN at the top. JSN gets the breakout that we were all hoping for his 2nd year last season in 2024. He finishes as a wide receiver 1, actually a wide receiver 2 in points per game, 15 points per game, which was 17th among wide receivers. He had 137 targets, which was great. That was 12th in the league. His target share was actually 30th, only 24% target share, which was a little lower than what you would have hoped, but I think that's going to go up this year with Lockett out of that offense and DK out of that offense, and now Cooper Kupp is joining that offense, and this is old Cooper Kupp. This is not as good of a route runner as he has been in the past, Cooper Kupp. I think the injuries have really caught up to him. He's lost a step. Here's what I anticipate will happen here. Looking at some of these efficiency metrics, JSN's ADOT was 79th among wide receivers last season at 8.7. Expect that to go up because you're going to see a guy like Cooper Kupp really play an exclusive slot role. Remember Stephon Diggs last season with Nico Collins? I think you're going to see the same type of pairing where in that small sample of Nico and Diggs playing at the same time together before Diggs went down with the ACL, they were very complementary, both very productive. You had a little bit of a lower ceiling Stephon Diggs with a nice little floor, and then Nico Collins, the big games where he could drop like 30 plus because he was just getting all of these opportunities downfield with Stephon Diggs really helping open up the field in the short to intermediate game. Look for that kind of on a lesser scale with JSN and Cooper Kupp, where I think you could see JSN moved outside a little bit more consistently, where he gets a lot more shots downfield. Sam Darnold versus Geno Smith in terms of passing volume is going to be pretty much a lateral move. You may prefer Geno as a QB a little bit more over Sam Darnold. I totally understand that. I think that's okay. I think JSN really being the top option solidify without a DK there is going to change his outlook, his production outlook this season, and really make up for the potential shortcomings at the quarterback position with Darnold. Next guy that we're going to have here is Ladd, a very different type of offense. You got a Greg Roman offense. I want to pull up the numbers for running backs and wide receivers in the same season under a Greg Roman offense, dating back to his days in San Francisco. I think the closest season where you had a running back one and a wide receiver one produce in the same offense was Crabtree and Frank Gore in the early 2010s. So it's not pretty, guys, seeing a wide receiver and what his potential production upside could be with a very, very high production upside running back as well in Omarion Hampton. I will say, though, there is a caveat to this, and clearly because we have Ladd ranked pretty high in this tier right there with JSN. I think Ladd has a very, very high floor. You saw that with his target opportunity last season. He finished as a high-end wide receiver 2. He stayed healthy the entire year. Pretty much he missed one game against Kansas City in week 14. He's pretty much the only option there, guys. QJ's not commanding volume. Trey Harris is a field stretcher. You can count on one thing in a Greg Roman offense, and that is one productive wide receiver. And you also have the best quarterback that you've ever seen in a Greg Roman offense in terms of his passing capabilities, and that's Justin Herbert. Colin Kaepernick was the next best consistent passing quarterback, right? Lamar in Baltimore, that was kind of the prime of his rushing days, where he wasn't throwing the ball as much during those Greg Roman times. Now Lamar is obviously, he's a lot better now, but Herbert really is the best passing quarterback that you've ever seen with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. So I would count on Ladd probably being a high-end wide receiver 2 at worst this season. I think he could be a low wide receiver 1. Regardless, he's going to have a pretty high floor. Next guy that we're going to have here in this tier is T. Higgins. Wide receiver 2 gets the extension. The dude averaged 17, 18 points per game last season as a wide receiver 2 in the Bugles offense. That offense and their outlook this season is not going to stop. They're going to average 35 points per game. Higgins expects some touchdown regression. He was top of the league in terms of the touchdowns that he was scoring. That will go down this season, but I think still with that regression, you're going to see some volume go up. And obviously, you would expect, hopefully, that he's going to play more than 12, 13 games in the season. Marvin Harrison Jr., this is a do-over on JSN, right? Last season, we were high on JSN, saying he was going to break out. He did. Expect that from Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. I mean, Marv last season was really a bust in that he didn't return on first-round redraft investment, first-round fantasy investment. That was too high, and we said it was too high last season. There was a lot of risk, admittedly, and he finished as wide receiver 30. He still had just under 900 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns for just under 120 targets. I mean, you look at this guy and his catchable target rate, it was bottom of the league. I mean, Kyler has to get his crap together, or we're going to be having another really bad conversation at the end of this season. We're counting on this on the accuracy rating going up. His target accuracy rating last year was 92nd in the league among wide receivers. That has to go up. That has to get better. Marv was open. He just wasn't getting the ball. So expect that to get better this season as they develop chemistry. Tyreek Hill, obviously very, very clear red flags. He obviously showed a big step back last season. Tua, you've got the questions with Tua, and is he going to stay healthy? Tyreek got a little banged up last year. He still has Tyreek Hill level upside, and I don't think he's out of his prime. I still think that he could put up mid-level wide receiver 1 level or wide receiver 1 production. He just has to show it. And then Garrett Wilson is in a less ideal passing volume situation in theory because it's not Aaron Rodgers. But honestly, I mean, you saw what Justin Fields was able to do for DJ Moore a couple of years ago in a equally as bad situation. There's not much production to be had for any receiving assets outside of the top option in a Justin Fields offense, but the top option can actually kind of get his own, and Garrett Wilson can command a decent amount of target volume we've seen with Tim Boyle as his quarterback. I think Justin Fields is competent enough to get him 140, 150 targets again this season.
All right, let's go to some of these guys are old crusty vets, but when you have an old crusty vet like Terry McLaurin, who's 29 years old, but he was a wide receiver 1 last year for the first time in his career because he got 117 targets and he scored 13 touchdowns. I mean, I don't think you have to have any issues with drafting Terry McLaurin this year as well. Now, here's the thing. The main thing with Terry is he did only have 117 targets last year. And so he only had 82 receptions. He really did make the most of his receptions when he did have them. But I would keep that in mind. He's probably unlikely to be a wide receiver 1 again, but I think he's firmly in this wide receiver 2 range. Devontae Adams, honestly, Devontae Adams was a wide receiver 1 last year and the year before and the year before and the year before and the year before. And then he was hurt and the year before. And then he was a wide receiver 2 and then the year before. So, like, Devontae... eventually, yes, he's not going to be a wide receiver 1. Probably this year, just because this is the first time I think in a really long time. In fact, it may be the first time since 2016 where he's not the guy in that offense, and he's not going to be. Puka's the guy in that offense, but it doesn't mean that they both still can't produce. And
I mean, Sean
McVay offenses, Matt Stafford offenses have a history of producing multiple high-end wide receivers. Adams could easily be a high-end wide receiver 2 this year. I think he has tons of upside, and I think it's a great fit in that offense. I mean, I have no problems drafting
Adams. Has never been paired with a Puka Nacua level talent at wide receiver. He's always been the guy and the only guy.
They're gonna both cook, in my opinion. I think they're both gonna cook.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin may not cook because he kind of got cooked last year. His leg did, at least. The ankle dislocation is tough. He played in 7 games. We do expect him to be healthy for this year, but at the same time, it's a 30-year-old wide receiver coming off an ankle dislocation, and so while he was a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy last year when he was actually healthy. I don't think we'll expect that this year, but I do still think people are sleeping on Godwin a little bit. He's cheap in pretty much every platform we've looked at so far, and we think that he is still going to get a ton of targets there, as will Mike Evans. Mike Evans last year, the thing about Evans is Evans has hamstring issues. Evans is 31 going on 32 now, does have some injury issues as well, but the upside is undeniable, and last year you still saw that. 29 points in week 17, 36 points in week 15, 25 points in week 13. It's literally every other week with Mike Evans. It always has been. 11, 25, 10, 36, 11, 29, 17.
That's a nice little floor.
Yeah, it isn't that. Yeah, so his floor is what, 10 points, right? 9 points maybe. You go to
Baltimore.
No, but 9 points was when he got hurt. That was the hamstring tweak game. That was against Baltimore. So, I mean, Evans was honestly pretty good last year from a fantasy perspective. And so, with that, the offense still being a high volume passing offense, Godwin and Evans are both guys I'm still looking at drafting this year, and I think are going to be a decent, mid to low end wide receiver 2 options. And then Rashee Rice, who we're not ranking because this is where we think he's going to finish. We're ranking him here because we're not sure if he's going to be available for week 1. But if he is, Rashee Rice could be a league winner. Period. Because when he was healthy last year, I mean, the dude was killing it. He was the top 5 wide receiver, right? I mean, it was only through 3 weeks, but, 29, 18, and 17 points. He had 9, 6, and 14 targets in those games, had 2 touchdowns. His yak was insane. He was top... Actually, he might have been first in the league in yak through 3 weeks. I mean, because it's the classic... 4-yard slant route, and then 12 yards after that. That's literally how they use them, and it's super effective.
The ball was out of Mahomes' hands to Rashee Rice before they snapped the ball. That's how quick it was.
The latest news on it literally was, and they used Worthy like that a couple times, and Worthy had a very good yak season as well. The last headline, Rashee Rice knee without limitations at OTAs. I mean, signs are pointing to him being ready for week 1.
He's running the full route.
So he could easily jump up here. I think Rashee Rice is somebody that I'm definitely comfortable drafting. I know there is significant risk in drafting guys that could be injured or coming off of injuries, but Rashee Rice, the upside there is too high for me to pass up.
Yep. F tier at the top. We're going to have the 2 rookies. You guys tell us in the comments what you want us to do with these rookies. We're still trying to gauge Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter and what their outlooks are going to be this season. I will say, though, with Travis Hunter, he is, I mean, for all intents and purposes right now, we're just going to assume that he's the 2 to BTJ in terms of production. We're going to be, again, conservative with his production outlook. How much is he going to play on defense? I think he's going to play majority offense. How much is that going to, be a knock on like what his usage is going to be ultimate? I don't really know. We'll see with Travis Hunter. Tet McMillan, we kind of have a general rule of thumb in fantasy where you don't want to draft top wide receivers in bad offenses. How bad is the Carolina Panthers offense this year, though, when Bryce Young kind of showed signs of life last season? There's a lot of questions there as well, not to mention, again, he is an unproven rookie who got good draft capital, but again, it's just kind of a crapshoot there. With Tet and Hunter, they are very, very interesting prospects heading into this season that could have high upside. But you're getting them at a little bit of a discount for a reason, and it's because they're rookies, and Hunter's behind BTJ, and Tet's playing for Carolina. DJ Moore gets a big knock because of the Loveland pick and the Burden pick in the draft this year. But I will say we're not as low on DJ Moore as a lot of people may be heading into this season. I think DJ Moore is still he's the top option until anyone else in that room proves that he's not or takes over that lead role. I mean, he's been the lead guy there for the last couple of years, and he's going to continue to be until Odunze takes the job, takes the lead role, or Loveland and Burden just shock us this season in terms of production. Xavier Worthy really came on last season and for the Chiefs when they needed him to with all those injuries. And I think you're going to see him kind of settle back into the role that they really wanted him to have. And that, in my opinion, is probably going to be more inconsistent volume on a weekly basis with big play upside. Rashee Rice is that slot wide receiver. That's why we have him a tier above. He's a slot wide receiver who's going to get consistent volume. Worthy is going to be the boom bust speedster who can take the top off of defenses, and he can also do some stuff in the backfield as well. Maybe they'll utilize him in the slot here and there, but I think that's going to be less consistent. He's a speedster. You use him to stretch the field. They've been needing that since they lost Tyreek Hill. Devonta Smith is a wide receiver too in an offense where Saquon Barkley is just going insane, and AJ Brown obviously there, and then the tush push has not been banned, so they're going to continue to do that in the red zone with Jalen Hurts. That just takes away a lot of touchdown red zone opportunity for Devonta Smith in terms of consistency. I will say though, as a true wide receiver too, Devonta Smith is very consistent with a full workload for the entire season. He's going to be on a weekly basis more boom bust, but over the course of the entire year, he's going to be pretty reliable, right? He's kind of like a DK Metcalf or a Mike Evans, really. In terms of production, he's going to have some really good weeks for you where you're very happy that you're able to start him. So I think he's going to be fine this year. Nothing about his outlook has really changed. Cortland Sutton had a career year last year with Bo Nix. We could see kind of similar to Terry, maybe a little bit of a step back there. We'll see what that offense looks like with a new running back in RJ Harvey. They're definitely going to try to run the ball more. DK Metcalf, now the true wide receiver one for the Steelers. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback there. When is Aaron Rodgers ever going to decide that he wants to play football? I don't really know. Regardless, I think you have to show him his flowers, give him his respect, and I will back it up with Zay Flowers, who's going to be right behind him here, the wide receiver one for Baltimore, another run-heavy offense, where Zay Flowers has just shown that he kind of has a cap ceiling, but he gets a good amount of volume. The issue is he gets a lot of work between the 20s and not inside the 20. So he doesn't get a ton of touchdown opportunity, a ton of red zone opportunity. It's just kind of discouraging. And how much can you ask from him when Derrick Henry's running the ball and Lamar Jackson has his rushing upside and Mark Andrews is really their go-to red zone target? We saw that towards the end of last season. You're going to get a lot of target volume with Zay Flowers, but just no specific week is really going to blow you away with him in terms of his production upside. Rome Odunze is a guy that could be a sleeper this year. We really like him this year. Again, for the same reason that DJ Moore has kind of fallen down a lot of boards, is why Odunze is all the way down here. Look, Odunze was fine last season. He wasn't insane. He wasn't crazy. He didn't have a alarmingly bad production season. He got plenty of volume. He got plenty of production for a rookie wide receiver, 730 yards, only 3 touchdowns, which was a bummer, but he had 100 targets in an offense where Shane Waldron and Matt Eberflus were running the show. Is that the only thing that I have? I guess that's the only thing that I have to tell you here. It was that ugly. It was that bad. So now you have Ben Johnson calling plays. Odunze and DJ Moore can both be productive in that offense together, which is why we have them in the same tier.
Yeah, and people will say, okay, what about Burden? What about Loveland? Look, we're calling our shot on Odunze. We think Odunze could be the wide receiver one there this year. That's kind of the thing. The G tier, Chris Olave, there are really 2 big red flags with Chris Olave. Number one is the quarterback situation there. Tyler Shuck looks to be the starting quarterback. We're not sure about his outlook from a short-term production standpoint for his wide receivers. And then also the fact that he has struggled with concussions. And so both of those make him a riskier pick. But he definitely still has the upside to where you should be selecting him in your fantasy football drafts. Addison, he has, speaking of upside, he has as much touchdown upside as anybody on this list, in my opinion. I mean, the dude makes his living scoring touchdowns, and yet he has done it in both of the years that he's played in the NFL now. Now he also has gotten himself into a fair amount of off-the-field trouble, incredible, but it hasn't seemed to affect anything on the field. It doesn't affect the amount of games he plays. He hasn't really been suspended either. And so with Addison, I mean, I think you feel pretty good about drafting Addison because he's a very high upside flex spot guy for you. Jameson Williams also high upside, but a little bit worried about Jameson Williams' fit in the new Detroit Lions offense compared to where Ben Johnson, when he was the offensive coordinator, I just felt like they were going to get JMO involved and they had some really creative stuff for that. So we'll see with the new Lions offense where JMO falls, but we're not super high on JMO for non-best ball just because of the fact that we think he could be the guy that takes the hit from the Ben Johnson departure in Detroit. George Pickens going over to the Cowboys. Historically, receivers moving out of the Steelers offense, moving out of Arthur Smith's offense in other places, both of those situations have typically been good for receivers going to new situations. So with that, I think Pickens could be a perfect complement to CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, we have CeeDee Lamb at the top of this list, but George Pickens could get, he could be a wide receiver 2 in fantasy football this year. He really could. The Cowboys might pass the ball enough for that to be possible. And if Dak's at full strength, I mean, he can support 2 wide receivers that are in the top 30. I think pretty easily. And so Pickens, I think, has some upside this year. Jerry Jeudy, we saw what he was capable of at the end of last year. And then really, the main situation with Jeudy that we're monitoring is, again, the quarterbacks, right? Who's going to start there? Who's going to throw Jerry Jeudy the ball? That's a big question. But we do know Jerry Jeudy last year turned it on and had some of the best ball of his career, in my opinion. And we'll see if he's able to carry that over into this year with, again, a shaky quarterback situation. We think the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco is Juwan Jennings. Truthfully, the wide receiver 1 there is George Kittle when you're talking about from a target share standpoint. And Christian McCaffrey also is going to get a fair amount of targets there. But in terms of Juwan Jennings versus Ricky Pearsall versus if Brandon Ayuk comes back, which I'm not sure about that at this point. We think Jennings showed that last year he was that guy. I think he is that guy. I think we do not need to look any further than last year to realize that Juwan Jennings will be the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco if Brandon Ayuk is not on the field and if he steps up and claims that role. Calvin Ridley, old player, bad offense, really hard to draft him, but he's the only guy there for the most part, and so you could make that argument. And I think he's going to be a top 40 wide receiver.
2 straight 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah, so it's not bad. He's definitely going to be a flex spot guy, a depth guy, and kind of the same thing with Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle has more upside, in my opinion, than anybody else on this list in this tier. But I mean, Waddle has just really decreased in his production profile recently, and so I'm not super optimistic for this year. Tua has to stay healthy. They have to make him a feature point of that offense, a focal point of that offense. We'll see if that happens. I'm really not sure it does, but I hope for his sake it does.
H tier is going to be Pearsall. We talked about him in the breakouts video. You go check that out if you haven't already. But with Pearsall, there's a lot of unknowns with him. Obviously, you had a little bit of sample size to see what he was capable of doing at the end of last season. They were kind of just experimenting and dealing with a lot of injuries anyways, though, so you haven't really seen him play with CMC, with Kittle, with Jennings, with Ayuk all at the same time in the same offense. We'll see what Pearsall can pull off this year. He could contend for Jennings for the top spot. We're just going to go with a pre-established talent in Jennings who has really proven it in greater sample sizes for the time being. Jacoby Myers is just very reliable. I will say, though, the Jack Bech pick is a little bit concerning. You wonder how he's going to fit in that offense. And then you have Genty and Bowers and the move to Geno. Geno will actually help that offense in terms of like production and overall volume in the passing game, but only so much when you're bringing in an Ashton Genty. They haven't had that in quite a while. That might be a knock on Myers, but also he just kind of always seems to get his own. He's very reliable, so we are going to give him his respect, put him in the H tier here. Shakir, very similar. He's a true slot wide receiver that has limitations, but he was a wide receiver 3 last year. I think he's capable of doing the same thing this season where they didn't really add any talent at the wide receiver position. You're going to see that offense in the way they operated very similar to how they looked in 2024. It's going to look the same in 2025. Darnell Mooney, I think, is very similar to Myers. I'm a lot higher on Mooney, I think, than Avery is, but this guy had just under 1,000 yards last season in a situation that has not changed, again, where Michael Penix and the volume that he provides isn't going to change compared to Kirk Cousins. Mooney was phenomenal last year. He was a good flex option for fantasy towards the end of the year. So I'm very optimistic that he's going to be able to do the same thing this season where they didn't add any extra talent or any contenders for that role. He's a nice field stretcher with some boom bust ability. Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed will be here together in the same tier. I think that tells you how we feel about both of them. Jaden Reed had really, really good flashes last year, mainly at the beginning of the season, and then his volume just went down and down and down and more inconsistent. And the reason really was because Josh Jacobs was just phenomenal, and they started to run their offense mainly through him. And we'll see what that looks like with Golden now coming in that offense. Clearly, they think Jaden Reed has his limitations as a receiver there. He could really be more of a gadget slot guy, more like he was utilized in his rookie season. I think that's where he was the most effective. But again, like the experience is there, and it's not there with Golden, who's kind of as a prospect a little bit more of a developmental receiver. So it could take him some time to get going as well. It really is. I mean, from a skill set perspective, Golden is the number one option. In a perfect world, that's what you want him to be. He's fast, he's big, he's tall, he's strong, he's got good enough hands. His route tree is a little bit questionable. So there's just a lot of ways, a lot of routes that you could go here with both of these guys in this receiver room where no one has really kind of just taken the opportunity to be the lead guy. And I think you're just going to see a lot more of Josh Jacobs run first, run heavy, and then figure out who wants to take that room and take ownership for Jordan Love in Green Bay. Josh Downs is going to be up next here. He's taken a big knock. Same with Pittman in the same tier here because of Tyler Warren. I think honestly both of us believe at this point that Tyler Warren is effectively the top receiving option in the Colts offense this season. Even more than Pittman and Downs. So that's, again, going to be reflected with both of these guys being in the H tier. Even if you think that Downs and Pittman are capable of getting more volume than Tyler Warren, like it's ugly regardless in that offense with Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson throwing them the ball. How likely is it that either of those QBs are actually going to be able to get the ball to any of these receiving assets in this offense? We just really don't know. The only guarantee is going to be Jonathan Taylor again in the run game. Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel, two old guys that have been really banged up the last couple of seasons that are now the number two options in their respective offenses. Deebo behind Terry, Kupp behind JSN. We'll see what they can do. Both of them, I think, are going to operate really as slot gadget guys. Deebo's going to have probably bigger play upside, probably better weeks if he can stay healthy. And Cooper Kupp is just not as good of a route runner as he used to be. Hopefully he's a nice exclusive slot option that can, ideally in a perfect world, you'd want to see him be the Stephon Diggs in Houston's offense, like how you saw that last season before he went down with the ACL. So we'll see with both of those guys, but honestly, we're not really expecting much from them this year.
A mixed bag in the I tier here. Ayuk and Diggs both coming off of ACLs.
Pending.
We just don't know, and they're going to be risky picks no matter what. These guys are looking like they're more long-term recoveries in the sense that they might join halfway through the season, which makes them a pretty risky pick in fantasy football, and honestly, I wouldn't shy towards any of those guys. Egbuka right now, unless Godwin doesn't come back healthy, unless Mike Evans, he's definitely somebody you want to draft in your fantasy leagues, but maybe not somebody that you want to count on starting unless, external circumstances kind of make that happen. And so with Egbuka, I definitely like his outlook, especially starting next year. This year, fantasy football, definitely worth drafting. Definitely take him in the later rounds, but do realize you might not be able to start him on a week-to-week basis. Rashad Bateman, he was startable at times last year. He's inconsistent as a wide receiver, but he was actually pretty good last year, and so I think he's worth drafting. Kyle Williams, we got some rookies here. Kyle Williams, Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh, and Luther Burden. Williams is the wide receiver one on his team, but he's a less sure thing of a prospect. And we really don't know there. It also depends on Diggs, and so we put them in the same tier. Jaden Higgins is the wide receiver 2 on his team, or wide receiver 3, depending on if Noel takes that spot. But Higgins, I think, has plenty of upside here. Keon Coleman, we saw Keon Coleman last year. He had opportunity. He had some flashes, but not really. Not enough to sustain anything. It was a wide receiver 71 last year in 13 games, and really the target volume wasn't there outside of, he had one double-digit target game. So, with Coleman, we're really going to have to see an uptick in the opportunity to be excited about that. Jack Besh goes to play alongside. Maybe he takes the Jacoby Myers role, but he plays alongside Brock Bowers, plays alongside Jacoby Myers, plays alongside Ashton Genty, and plays alongside Geno Smith, who will be throwing him the ball. A lot of people think Besh is a sleeper, so who knows? And then Luther Burden, again, we already talked about. We're calling our shot with Odunze in that offense. Burden could still be fantasy productive, though. And because of the level of prospect he was, I think he's worth picking up in your fantasy football league. So, again, this is version 1. Not exactly 100% sure yet, but we're still working it out. And honestly, I think a lot's going to change as we even get into training camp and things like that. So again, if you play fantasy football, make sure you drop a like and make sure you're subscribed. Those two things help us out. Drop a comment. Tell us, wait, I think I like this guy better. I like this guy worse, or whatever. We love hearing that stuff. And so, it is June, it's early, and so these are very preliminary, but I think we're excited to get into this season. So we appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.